Well, again, to my North Park community, it's good to connect with you via video. Thanks again for all your comments with the recent interview I did with Emmanuel. A lot of sharing going on around with friends, and the feedback was amazing. So appreciate Emmanuel's vulnerability and sharing with us, and that was so amazing. And so as I've continued to receive the feedback in my own journey, I thought I want to continue this conversation. And so I thought I want to call my friend Ziyad. We've had a number of conversations around racism and what he's experienced and what he's read about. And so I thought, let's keep the conversation going and let's have a conversation with Ziyad Darwish. And so let me give you a quick synopsis of his life. Then we're going to dive in deep. Sure. Ziyad was born in a Palestinian refugee camp in Syria, in Damascus. And for the first 3 years of his life, he was there. Then the next 7 years, he was in Tunisia. And the next 7 years, he lived in Palestine. And his father held various government positions throughout his lifetime there. At 17, he decided to break out and free himself from family life, if you want to say. And he moved to France and did 3 years of school. Ziyad already had learned English and French as well as his Arabic growing up. And so he settled into France for 3 years. Then he came to London, Ontario to continue his schooling. He went to Fanshawe. And while he was there, he met this white, blonde-haired, cute Canadian girl, and he thought, I have eyes for you. Yep. And he started chatting with her, and he wanted more. And she said, I'm a follower of Jesus. And Ziyad had grown up in a culturally Islamic family, so to say, but she couldn't connect that way. So that took Ziyad on a faith journey. And over a couple of years, he investigated. He ended up coming to faith in Jesus. And this girl ended up accepting a marriage with him, and they've been married for how many years now?
June 25th will be 9 years.
9 years this coming June, end of June, which is amazing. Yep. And so now he has a great marriage and experiencing all kinds of things in life. And Ziyad has great stories to tell. And in his own and understanding of who God is and racism and what he's experienced. So we want to dive in and see what Ziyad has for us. So I want to just go back. Your first 17 years of life, first in a refugee camp in Tunisia, then Palestine. What was life like for you with your family and your parents, and what did you experience?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having the conversation, to be honest. So growing up, my family has always been loving, caring, and supportive. But wherever we landed, whether we were in Syria or in Tunisia or in Palestine, we were the outsiders. Right? So in Syria, we were the refugees. In Tunisia, we were the Palestinians. Even in Palestine, we were the Palestinians that left and came back. Okay. So we were always kind of seen as an outsider from popular culture, if you want to say. Okay. My parents, as you mentioned, are culturally Muslim, so they don't practice, they don't fast, they don't do any of that. But when I went to France, being in a new country by myself and so on, my only kind of anchor was my faith. So I actually became, or I practiced my faith more often.
Okay. So you had learned the practices, I guess, culturally speaking, I guess, in Palestine, and then you embraced them then in France.
Yeah. Okay. So I was, praying and fasting and so on. My parents at that point didn't really care that much because it was, again, part of the culture, so it was fine. And then, as you mentioned, I came to Canada and met my beautiful wife now, Elena.
Let me back up one step.
Sure,
France.
Yes.
Normal life? Did you experience any racism in France? Right. Or you could practice your faith as you wanted to? And what were those 3 years like for you?
Yeah. As you said, I was 17, so I didn't, I kind of, stuck to myself. I would just go to university and hang out with my own friends. I didn't see it myself per se, but I saw it with others. So France has a lot of North African, or where I was, North African population, so people from Tunisia, Algeria, and so on. And you saw this, or you still see the systemic racism because they're ghettoized. So they're put in specific locations and so on. As an Arab-looking man, I was automatically put in that category, and people didn't know or knew where I came from. So rarely was it that people would have conversations, back then about any of those issues.
Okay.
But yeah, it was great.
You felt accepted overall in your time in France, so nothing was, as far as you understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No major, kind of backlash or feeling, that somebody was being racist towards me.
Okay.
But it was kind of an unspoken, we know what it is, but nobody talks about it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So you come to Canada.
Yeah.
Your first 2 years, you aren't a Christian.
Yes.
What's your first 2 years like? First of all, in Canada.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your wife in a second. But
Yeah.
what did you experience in Canada those first years?
I still remember, so when I first came, I took Robert Q from Toronto, and my first kind of idea is there's a lot of big cars, trucks, and so on the highway.
Okay.
I wasn't used to it. Everything's clean and beautiful, and trees and so on. Went to Fancha and made a couple of friends there, and yeah, it was again the first couple of years. It wasn't on my mind. I didn't. It was in the shadow. All of those issues were behind me. I'm just focused on studying and so on.
You never, as a student, you never really experienced anything different for yourself as far as you could see?
Right. For me, it was different in the sense where, because I had the language, because I was privileged to have the finances to afford to pay for international fees and so on, and so I didn't see it myself.
Okay.
But thinking back now, I can see how things were not
the same
for
everybody.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you meet Alana.
Yep.
Your wife now.
Yep.
And you start figuring out faith. You start coming to North Park as part of that whole journey. What are you experiencing at that time as far as being a Muslim?
Yeah.
And someone from a Palestinian. What's happening there?
Yeah. The beauty I found in both the Christian faith and when Alana and I started coming to North Park is it was one of the first places I felt accepted for who I was.
What that looked like? Curious as to what.
People were genuinely interested in having conversations and understanding where I came from, my experiences, and so on. Okay. It was a safe place where I can share my feelings and hear people's thoughts. People were available to have conversations. Okay. So yeah, it was honestly the first space where I can say I felt confident and secure enough to have those conversations with people who generally wanted to listen. Okay.
Right? Nice. It's nice to know.
Yeah.
That North Park was a welcoming place for you. Yeah. So you got married. What's it like as a Arabic-speaking Palestinian Middle East guy married to a blonde-haired white woman?
Yeah.
What have you guys experienced as a couple even? Is there anything strange or interesting there for you guys?
As we said, we've been married for 9 years. We've been together for about 13. But until today, we still have challenges in the sense of I grew up with a specific culture, a specific way of, thinking or doing things and so on, and Alana grew up differently. Yeah. Not to say that one is better or any of that. It's how do we bring both together, right? And I always tell her, I say, I am Palestinian, but I'm also Canadian. Okay. Right? It's not one or the other. Okay. Just like I understand that, people can have different perspective and from their own different experiences. So I'm speaking today as a Palestinian, but as we've talked before, and I'm a privileged Palestinian. Okay. Right. Okay. My experiences, my outlooks, my views, and my lack or my limited experiences with racism is a result of I'm able to live a certain way. Alana and I can afford a certain lifestyle. Okay. Right. So all of that affects.
Okay. There's many layers to this piece going on. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we've often talked about it's never easy.
Yes.
To cross the border. Right. Into the U.S. with Ziyad.
Yeah.
Explain what's going on there.
My first experience with it kind of took me back with blunt racism. Okay. We were crossing into. I remember Alana and I and a few other members of North Park, we were going to Chicago for an Alpha conference. We were involved in Alpha and we wanted to learn more and so on. And
a car full of Jesus lovers.
Exactly. And it was, well, Alana is white, me, we had a lady who was Indian, and the gentleman who was British. So I warned them, I said, hey, just so that you know, when we go, I'm gonna get stopped. At that point, I wasn't yet a Canadian citizen.
Okay.
So they said, oh, it's fine, no worries, and so on. So we rented a car, we crossed the border, we get stopped, and I get taken for interrogation. And the gentleman who was asking questions, you know, where are you going and so on, and we had everything prepared and whatever, and we were showing them, oh, we're going to Chicago for a Christian conference, and he said, oh, okay, so you live in London? And I said, yeah, and he said, well, are you part of a terrorist cell in London?
He asked that directly to
Directly.
you? Okay.
And I was kind of taken back, and I was like thinking back about it now, what was the basis of those questions? Right? Is it because it shows that I was born in Syria because of my name? Even though I told you and I showed you that I am a Christian, you're still attributing or, you know, trying to say that I belong to those things. So I brushed it off back then. But yeah, I mean, nowadays, thankfully, I have my Canadian citizenship, so travel is a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, it happened. Alana and I went back to Palestine a couple of years ago. And a similar instance happened with the Israeli border control, where I gave them my Canadian citizenship or passport, and they said, give me your Palestinian one. And he essentially began arguing with me that I'm not a Canadian, I am a Palestinian. Okay. So it's those instances where it becomes, are you trying to remind me that I'm less than you, less than who God thinks or tells me I am? Yeah.
So interesting in your life, in some ways, you called yourself a privileged Palestinian.
Yes.
So in some places of the world, you are just fine.
Yeah.
And you've kind of lived in privilege, but you're also experiencing less than privilege. This whole aspect of racism, why is this a passion of yours? Yeah. We often jump in these conversations, and just give me a quick synopsis of what is it with you? Because of what you've experienced or what you're seeing around you, or why is it for you an important conversation to embrace? And once again, as a community, we're trying to embrace this further. What do we need to understand? There's many different races that connect to North Park. Have we been intentional enough in our conversation? So why is it for you? Yeah.
So when I say privilege, it's essentially the power that I can ignore it. Okay. Right. So I can say that this is not a problem because it doesn't affect me. Okay. Right? So I can ignore it because I am fortunate enough and blessed enough to not have experienced it on a daily basis. Okay. But I also learned and saw that those experiences and those challenges and this oppression, there are people who experience it on a daily basis in London, Ontario. Okay. Right. So the least I can do is use the privilege and the power and the knowledge that I have, that I've been blessed to have, to learn and to speak with, not for, with individuals who experience this. I still remember my first experience in London with racism. Alana and I were at Walmart. She loves looking at stuff there and so on. And I'm just standing there and, waiting, and there was these 3 beautiful teenage girls who were wearing the hijab, who were coming towards us. And there was 2 other ladies on the other side. And the ladies on the other side out loud said, "Look at these terrorists coming to take over our country."
Wow.
And I was standing there, and just rage came over. And my face turned red. Alana saw me, and she knew exactly that I'm gonna react in a bad way. Okay. So she grabbed me and she said, "Let's walk away." Right. So I always think about that. Okay. I'm grateful for her to say, having said, let's walk away, because
that moment wouldn't have been good.
Exactly. Okay. My reaction at that point would have not been a godly, reaction, or if Jesus was standing there, what he would have wanted me to say. Okay. Right. But I always think back about that interaction and think, how can we have those conversations? Right? Because there is always, we need to have that conversation, especially the church. There is a link, a direct link between...
That was my next question, and maybe my last question. How do you Because you didn't grow up in the church,
Right.
Islamic, and you're practicing Muslim in France for 3 years.
Yeah.
What would you like the church maybe to engage in more, or the church, please don't ever do this?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, the two questions are linked. So to go back to why I'm passionate about it is because one of the reasons why I became a Christian is because I believe God created all of us and loves all of us.
Okay.
Right? Regardless of whether I'm brown, white, black, those categories have been set up by us.
Okay.
So we can change them.
Okay. So the image of God.
Exactly.
Theology is so ingrained in you.
Yeah.
We're all created equal that way.
Yeah. And I have to believe that, because otherwise the world tells me that I'm less than.
Okay.
Right? And God tells me that no, I am loved for who I am. I am cherished. Right? So that is why I'm passionate about it. But I'm also passionate about it because like I said, I'm lucky enough to know maybe 1% of what needs to be known.
Okay.
But I love sharing. I mean, if we don't share our experiences with each other, and if we don't not just hear but listen during our conversations, then there's no point.
Okay.
Right? The world is glim as it is. The church has to and can be the light in those moments. Right? So as far as what the church can do, keep the conversation going. I know that right now it is in the forefront in the news and in social media and so on. Yeah. It doesn't have to be on social media. It doesn't have to be on the news. But this is the reality of millions on a daily basis, right? And like I said, I speak from a privileged position. I always tell my beautiful wife, if you want to learn more, talk to an indigenous woman who lives on a reserve. Okay. Right? Her experience is very different than mine. I can't speak for her. Right? So our experiences are different, but there is a core issue, which is when I say we, racialized people are not viewed or treated as equal in specific aspects. Okay. Right? So, yeah.
The beauty of everybody's story. And are we willing just to pause and stop and enjoy a story? And I think what you're encouraging all of us to do, and that's why I'm glad I could talk to you, and we're friends.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. So Ziyad, thank you.
Absolutely.
And once again, North Park community, this is just another piece of the puzzle. We could talk for hours here. But whose stories are you hearing? Are you coming with just curiosity, with the mindset we are all made in the image of God, loved by God equally, and that's the step we go into. So whether someone is Palestinian or African or is homeless or is indigenous, we all have beautiful stories in the image of God. So Ziyad, thank you for adding to the story.
Absolutely.
And look forward to what God wants to continue to do in and through us as we continue to walk this journey together.